So I heard this term last night called Mithya. Not 100% I'm pronouncing that right, but pretty much is what it means is that when things aren't quite as they appear. So, and I really like the term. First of all, because I like it when there's a name gets put on something that, I don't know, that I've understood or been interested in. And so my whole spiritual awakening, spiritual path can be traced back to my massage therapy schooling. And I'll go into the full story at some point. But watching one of these shows, what the bleep do we know? At one point they're showing that, you know, the kid's bouncing a basketball and he's explaining how it appears as though this basketball is bouncing off the ground, as if I'm actually bouncing this basketball. To most folks, that's 100% true. But then they zoomed in on it to the point where the electrons that are part of the atomic structure of the basketball, as they get closer to the electrons that are part of the atomic structure of the ground, they get close enough and they just repel each other. They bounce off of each other. And so it was both mind-boggling, fascinating, and interestingly creepy all at the same time, that suddenly I saw the world that nothing's really touching. Nothing is as it is. Probably helped that I've done hallucinogens more than I should have in my life, that it was easy for me to adopt this understanding that the world in which I see is not 100% accurate, that it can be manipulated, twisted. But it was great seeing it in a clear state of mind. It was one of those moments of just like, wow, where I just saw the whole world different. Like, I remember sitting there very distinctly with my hands and just touching my hands and being like, my hands aren't actually touching right now. My understanding of touch is based off electromagnetic signals. There is no actual contact with anything. It really is nothing but nothing. My mind's going back there again. But even an atomic structure of anything is 99.99% empty space. So any solid object in which you notice or observe or think, this car, my cup, my glasses, the pen, my body, is mostly empty space. Now, how fascinating is that? How wonderfully amazing is that? I don't know. It opened me up. I'll say that. And so last night they said this name. I think it's Mithya. That there's a lot of things in this world which aren't quite as they appear, like the sunset, sunrise. You know, to us it looks like the sun's rising. Really, it's the horizon that's rising. A couple other examples. You know, there's a lot of examples of this kind of stuff. You know, and so what it lended to was the fact that the mind can be misled, can just simply based off of its sensory input, can be led astray. So anybody that's seen those little pictures online of like the lines that go different directions, but it looks like the boxes are all different shaped, but when you put a straight line on them, it lines up. You know, there's ways in which our mind attempts to fill in the blanks when it doesn't quite understand something, or when it doesn't quite whatever, it'll just fill in the gap. And to me, this speaks to what we do in our mental and emotional state, in our relationships with people, in our life. We fill in the gaps. We fill in the factual stuff with stuff that our mind creates or fills in or filters it through a particular lens. And so this understanding of Mithya, this understanding that things aren't always as they appear, has been one of my biggest, like, releasing of anger things that I've worked on over the years, that I've had to keep telling myself, almost like an active mantra, that you don't know the whole story. And I've had to say this a lot to myself, a lot. You don't know the whole story, because it irritated me so much when I would get upset about a situation or an event or something, and I would like vent about it and talk blah blah blah, and just to find out that I didn't really know the whole story. There was a piece of information I didn't know, or there was something that appeared one way and was really something else. So I take this with a grain of salt too when it comes to watching videos and looking at pictures, the whole social media thing, that things aren't always as they appear. So just because I see something a particular way, just because I hear something a particular way, does not mean that it's the absolute truth. There are things that are true subjectively to me in my world, which is fine. We all have our own subjective reality, but we have to check that shit at the door when it comes to interpreting the rest of the world. That's where we get in trouble, because we start attempting to filter the rest of the world through that same subjective lens, and that's where we end up with all these all this disconnected way of being. We'll say that. We'll keep this focused. So I love this Mithya concept, and I'll dive into it more. It just brought me back to the beginning of my awakening, and it's amazing when you can start looking around at the world and seeing things as they are. For me, this is also where spirituality and science started blending together. So I get frustrated when I have folks in my life that only see things as one or the other. I'm like, you don't understand it enough then to understand. Anyone that understands science enough becomes spiritual. Anybody that understands spirituality enough becomes a scientist. They're mutually interdependent of each other. They are one and the same. Now, are there factions and paths of both avenues that get lost and whatever interpreted? Yes. That's not what I'm talking about. To me, that's not really spirituality or science. But once you get to the fundamental understandings of just our existence, for example, the universe, the understanding of atomic structure, of quantum entanglement, of quantum mechanics, of the fact that everything breaks down into one grand unified energetic field, that things just get recycled and reused, that everything is all just kind of recycled meshes of the same thing. How can you not come to any other conclusion besides, wow, everything really is connected? And that really is what a lot of spiritual paths try to find. That's what a lot of scientific paths try to find. They try to find that the common denominator. And I don't know, it's beautiful. So yeah, just look around. Take a moment to look around at the world that's around you, no matter what you are. If you're in a room, if you're driving, anywhere you are, just look around at all the objects and all the things around you, and just understand that it's not quite as it seems. Doesn't mean that it's not real. Be careful there. A lot of folks will say, that's because this world isn't real, it's an illusion. Bullshit. Go learn you something. Just because something's not as it appears doesn't mean that it's not real. And even though my hands are not touching, touch is very real. It's just not real in the sense that I understand it. To me, in my head, I imagine skin on skin, like cells touching, connection, but that's really not what's happening. That's what it feels like, that's what it's interpreted as, but that's not really what's happening. When you understand what's really happening on a deeper level, you see how that's real, but not quite real in the way in which I thought it was. So I do want to clarify that point, because those people that deny this existence are up there with flat earthers with me, where it's just, if you want to spend your life dissecting whether the world is flat, okay, you're gonna have a hard life. Like, I don't know. It's just like, if you spend your life trying to really decide whether 1 + 1 = 2, then you're never going to be able to learn anything else in math because you're so hung up on a basic concept. It's like, which some people, they want to, and there's some good stuff that has come out of people diving back into something that was a given, that was understood. And for those folks, great, do it, have fun. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to understand that 1 + 1 = 2. I'm going to take it as a given that the world is a sphere, and I'm going to go from there. I'm going to focus on some other aspects of life. So, what do they say? You do you, boo? All right. Later, guys.